clinical informatics and brand planning, product value validation for payers, physician adoption of data gathering tools. How do all these issues converge to create clinical and operational advantages for all parties? And how can pharmaceutical manufacturers continue to drive progress in this area? Join us to find out. In the Know starts now. Hello and welcome to In the Know, your source for insight and analysis on the issues that matter to our dynamic healthcare market. I'm your host, Gina Clark. Today, we examine what progress has occurred in the areas of clinical and supply chain informatics and how new solutions are providing greater product insight to pharmaceutical manufacturers. We'll discuss the therapeutic areas where informatics solutions look to provide the greatest return on investment, and we'll explore how physician attitudes toward data sharing influences the comprehensiveness of available data. Returning to In the Know are Matt Johnson, Vice President of Strategy for AmerisourceBergen Specialty Group, and Cory Shouse, Director of Enterprise Business Intelligence for AmerisourceBergen Specialty Group. Thanks to you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us back.
Yes, thanks.
It's been about a year since we last spoke about the value of clinical and supply chain informatics for pharmaceutical manufacturers. From your perspective, what has changed in the market during this time in terms of available offerings and manufacturer expectations?
Well, in terms of, since we spoke last time, the expectations have really only gone higher, and the trends in terms of demanding cleaner, more actionable data have only really increased. From the provider side of things, manufacturers are very interested in how their products are used, not just that they're being sold to a particular physician. They specifically want to understand if there are any sort of barriers that are financial or clinical to the physician utilizing their drug and really getting the fullest possible adoption. And in terms of informatics, you see there's an increased number of tools that now work together as an integrated system to try to find any lost opportunities or lost charges.
What barriers still exist to getting the right data to manufacturers, and what can be done to overcome these obstacles?
Well, Gina, we're continuing to see the increased adoption of EMRs, and that's going to be key to collect and analyze that clinical data and provide that back to pharmaceutical manufacturers. That leads to a quality question around how do we, clean the data, transform the data, and provide it back to pharma. As we talked about last year, each oncology practice may enter data differently. Each physician within that practice may enter data differently. So what we want to do is we want to tell a good story back to pharma, but to do that, we may need to clean some of that data, transform it, so that they can get meaningful use out of it.
How have external factors like healthcare reform and greater scrutiny around therapy costs impacted the need for informatics solutions?
That's a tremendous driving force. One of the key parts of healthcare reform is first looking at the clinical effectiveness. And for that, you need to combine both the clinical and primarily the clinical information to understand how the products are using and how relatively effective they are. And then if you look on the commercial side of things, outside of the healthcare initiative, but just a general trend that managed care is pursuing these days, they also want to combine that clinical efficacy with cost effectiveness. So what you end up seeing is both the need for sort of longitudinal data just to track and monitor the brand performance, as well as then the analytics and health outcomes that go with it to really determine both the clinical and cost efficacy. And I think that's just going to play a very central role going forward.
What therapeutic areas hold the most potential for success with an informatics strategy? Are there some areas where it makes more sense for a manufacturer, either from a clinical insights or an operational improvement perspective?
Those are primarily in the specialist areas, the biggest one being oncology. There you have the widest variety of diseases. Cancer isn't just a single disease, it's many different diseases. And of course there are many different therapies and many different ways to use those therapies. And right now, a very heterogeneous environment. So the need to really get clean, good, actionable data there is very key. And probably that's where the majority of also the void or the biggest opportunity is to fill the gap. There are also key other specialist areas such as rheumatology, urology, ophthalmology, dialysis, nephrology, and then especially the blood product derivatives like IVIG and clotting factor are also very key areas of interest because, again, there are so many different uses for those types of drugs.
In terms of informatics resources, what are many manufacturers able to do on their own versus what they are seeking from companies like ABSG?
Well, depending on the maturity of the manufacturer and their own business intelligence analytics department, some manufacturers may just want syndicated data. So we may just give them a data set that they can then take and use their clinical analyst and to review and make sense of the data. Also, for those that may not have that capability in-house or want a third party that's neutral take a look and analyze the data, we have companies like Exenda and the ABSG family that can take and do that for them.
Do you find that there are different needs and expectations for informatics that correlate to the size of the manufacturer or the market footprint of specific products?
Really, regardless of whether they're a small manufacturer or a big manufacturer, a lot of them face the same challenges when they bring a product to the market, whether it's before the product's released into the market, where you may be wanting to take a look at payer mix analysis. Once it is released into the market, you may want to start looking at comparative effectiveness, and then a year after the product's been released, you may want to look at health policy surveillance. So the reality is all those analytics and that information is important to all manufacturers, whether they're small or large.
And where do payers continue to fit into the mix? Are they receptive to manufacturers being able to access this level of product information? Is there opportunity for them to be collaborative in this process?
There's very definitely an opportunity for that to occur. What we've seen really now, it's changed in the last since we last spoke, was that payers are now really very interested in partnering both with physicians and manufacturers to come up with solutions that really work for everybody. Not really looking for something that traditionally had maybe been considered too payer-centric, but something that's really more pro-physician and more pro-manufacturer. And this is really where informatics lies at the heart of this, because you're combining both the financial type of data, the practice management type of data, as well as the clinical data. And really where we're seeing most interest right now is to develop the clinical pathway tools that capture the key fields like staging, tumor type. And really the key difference that we bring to bear that's different is that a lot of other clinical pathway adherence is measured after the fact. In our case, it's actually going to be measured prospectively before treatment begins. So I think it's a way to have the physician also benefit by getting out of a prior authorization or maybe even getting some differential reimbursement.
To what extent does physician adoption of tools like electronic medical records affect the ability for manufacturers to gain the insights they need?
Clearly, an EMR system and collecting the data electronically is needed to do analysis. It's very difficult to do analysis off of paper and files inside these physicians' offices, so we really need to really hope to continue to see the EMR adoption across oncologists and physicians who are using the data.
In what ways might all this benefit physicians and encourage them to be more open to sharing de-identified clinical data? How might these physician-facing benefits be more effectively communicated to the practices?
Well, clearly, we do not want the physician to enter data into the EMR system just clearly for the benefit for the manufacturer. We have to show benefit back to that practice in some form or fashion. And that's where our nucleus performance management solutions come into play, because we have a solution called Practice Analyzer that actually allows the practice to take a look in its patient performance in an aggregate perspective and drill down into each individual patient. And so collecting the data actually provides value back to that provider from a clinical perspective. In addition, we also have financial performance management, where they can see from a practice perspective how they're doing financially. And clearly, both of those components, both the patient and the financial health of the practice, are important, and we recognize that with our NPM solutions.
And one of the things that I think is really different about Nucleus solutions compared to some of the other tools out there is that there isn't just a tool set that works, or there isn't just one way of doing it. We actually are very open and really focus a lot of our energy to interface correctly with a lot of different EMRs and practice management systems. The goal there really being to make sure both the data remains clean, but then also making sure that from the practice administrative burden that they're not double entering data or triple entering data for the different constituencies like manufacturers or payers.
Yeah, I mean, the workflow within a practice has been one of the biggest barriers to a physician embracing an EMR, because at the point of care, they want to make sure that they're providing care, not entering data into a system. So with NPM and our Nucleus solutions, what we're really trying to do is make sure that that workflow combined with the tool set work together as part of the solution.
I know we asked you this question last year, but given how much has changed in the healthcare environment in 2010, where do you see the future headed for healthcare informatics?
Well, similar to last year, I had mentioned that there was no magic holy grail or source of perfect data, and there still isn't, but we're definitely very much getting closer. Now we have a renewed ability to pull information from both clinical as well as financial data and be able to play that back to both the practices as well as manufacturers, and do this over a very significant portion of time to both give the insights into brand performance, brand management in terms of data feeds themselves, as well as combine that back to our Xenda group and do some of the health outcomes measurement to do clinical and cost effectiveness.
Assuming we get from where we are to what you just described, how do you think it will change the way pharma develops and deploys its product strategies? How will it change the way pharma works with providers and payers?
One of our companies last year did a study and questionnaire with managed care providers or payers, and as part of that, we realized that 65% of the respondents said that from payers, when they meet with manufacturers, the meetings aren't meeting their objectives. So the more data that we can provide about the product, about the financial aspect, to give that to pharma to take to the payer, the more likelihood that that pharmaceutical company's product will be put on a regimen.
Matt and Cory, terrific insight as always. Thanks again for providing an update on this continually changing issue.
Thanks for having us, Gina.
Yes, thanks.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back soon with another all-new webisode. Until then, if it's on your mind, it's in the know.